Registrar of the Museum and Archives, and also do some work for a new media gallery. I've been with the City of New Westminster since I started as a summer student in 1991. So I've been here a while and have scanned many more photos than I'd like to count, even though there is a bit of an accounting at the end of this one. So today's photographs are from the Croton Studios. It was a commercial photography studio that had 3 locations and at least 2 owners through its life. We have the LeBlanc brothers running it originally, and then it's the Dibble, Bob Dibble. This is a photo from the LeBlanc era. This is 12th and Auckland, so just in southwest New Westminster, and it's Butler Tire. We don't know. They also have a car dealership just up 12th behind there. We don't know why this dapper lady is having her photo taken beside her DeSoto coupe, but she is. I would also like to imagine it's a nice bright red. So we'll get in. I have a slightly different acknowledgement, which obviously we'll have to get on our SEM page somehow, but we'd like to start by acknowledging that the land we learn, live, and play today is the traditional and unceded territory of the Hamaltam peoples. This refers to a language group that more widely encompasses the Indigenous people who used and continue to use this land, and includes nations such as the Kikite, Kwantlen, Katsi, Kakutlam, Musqueam, Stolo, Tsawwassen, and Tsleil-Waututh. And we'll get into the photos now. So here are 2 of the photographers we're going to be showing the work of today. On the left, as you might notice, is a slightly earlier photo. That's Don LeBlanc, who started and created Croton Studios. They were originally, just let me look at something, over on 12th Street. I have a little envelope from one of the negatives over there. They then relocate at some, and I'm not sure the order, to the Boswell Dance Building, which is on Blackley by the River's Reach, in the behind by the parking lot. And then they were at Middlegate Mall for a while. On the right is Bob Dibble. I really am curious about this photo because I don't know why someone is transporting a 1966-67 Honda S800 coupe on an air packing platform, and why, I just don't know why this photo exists. I would like an answer, but that is Bob Dibble. He tends to be later, so the 50s and 60s and maybe a little bit of the 70s. I would assume he started off working with the LeBlancs. Now, I would like to imagine that this is me. It's a gentleman who is probably the photographer or technician for the then probably very magical photo scanner probably for someone like Associated Press or Canadian Press. You can see he's rolling a photo onto a drum scanner, which will then scan and transmit the image probably to points east, because this is from the opening of the Peace Arch Park. And it's probably a picture of President Johnson speaking at the podium. But it's just a detailed image of someone being finicky with a scanner. So I like to consider that as someone I would get along with. So this is a very eclectic photo collection. It goes from, if you want pictures of furniture that were built in New Westminster, we have it. If you want them without a background, we have those as well. Almost any piece of machinery made will have pictures of it. We also have this example of the old entrance to the police station at City Hall. So this is the east side. It really no longer exists. I was rather surprised when I first saw this photo, and then now we found negatives of the same photo decades later. And this would have been at the time where The road cut very close to City Hall because Duke of Connaught High School would have still been standing just out of picture over to the right. And since we're at City Hall, you may never have noticed, so we've got two photos here. Over on the left, and you'll see we have a pair of City of Westminster streetlights. This is, what is his name? Gordon H. Peary, who was the mayor of Westminster. He visited for the centennial of the city. And then we have him and I'm not sure, it's definitely his wife and others. I think I recognize this as a city clerk, touring the then museum, which is in Irving House. So this is the upper back bedroom of Irving House. And as you can see, we've got some panorama photos, and this was the May Queen room. We've had other dignitaries come through. Irving House was a bit more of a community center or meeting hall at times. Here we have members of one of the groups that helped found the museum. The Native Sons, who along with the Native Daughters, they saved Fort Langley, were very much involved in Victoria as well as Nanaimo, where they had the Bastion Museum. The Native Daughters have had other museums as well as, I can't think of this old schoolhouse in Vancouver. But anyways, here they are presenting to Native son Raymond Burr. I think it was an honorary certificate or membership to the Native Sons. But this is again in Irving House, but now we're downstairs on the main floor in the dining room, and I'm recognizing artifacts that are still there today. So that's very nice. This photo is a little different. If you watched my previous talk, you might have noticed there were some times where some civil defense trucks as part of a Trans-Canada Roadshow were shown. Well, here is one of 3 photos of your official City of New Westminster basement bomb shelter. For your beautiful family of 4, by counting bricks, you can see it's 10 bricks high, which means you have about 6 foot 6 inches of clearance down there. And here is your official bomb shelter plan. So take note, there would be an external wall coming here. So I'm not even sure if they plan on you having a door there, but I suppose in the early days of before hydrogen bombs, this actually might have given you some benefit, but not for very long. But I do think it's interesting there were official city bomb shelter plans. And since we're spanning the early 1950s in some of these photos, these are all taken in White Rock. It was the Diamond J Ranch, which was then in the 1600 block of Brown Road, which is now 32nd Avenue, in the Kensington Prairie part of White Rock. So they seem to have had all numbers of activities. There seemed to be, we can also see they had some electricity, so you weren't totally roughing it. Little mini stagecoaches and little horses would have been quite the fun place to go were you a cowboy or cowgirl of the time. We also have images from a nudist colony, which is apparently still there, not including any photos of that for this exhibit. Okay, so CKW sponsored Soapbox Derby Car here. You might notice it's 1320, so that was their original frequency when they were, and this went fairly late in Westminster, but it originally started in the not the Russell Hotel, the King Ed Hotel at Begbie and Columbia Street. They then moved down the block, closer to just past 4th, and then eventually up into what I believe was an old Safeway, because the Piggly Wiggly was on the other side of the street, where they operated till the 90s, which is now where McDonald's is, Alan McBride. So they're only sponsoring the car. This is actually the Royal Canadian Legion. I'm pretty sure it was full-on Legion at that point. It wasn't British Empire Service League. But here we have the full field of cars of 1 year. Not really certain why we have color images of this, and some of the few color images we actually have from the Croton collection. And if you haven't figured out where we are yet, the next few photos will start showing. I really think this is something we should get the city to, or get done in the city again. And if you are a young person who biked in this city, you'll probably recognize this as the First Street Hill. So right behind us would be 10th Avenue, and we're looking down what is an even steeper hill than is portrayed by this photo. It's a very steep street. And going towards 8th Avenue with a bit of the works yard off to the side there. And this was obviously a very big event because none of the photos shown in this series are in the first color series. But here we're down a bit lower, so we're about 9th Avenue here. We've got the works yard and the old Quonset hut there. And I can also point out, and I believe this one and the next one, one of the reasons why we need to scan these photos is because right about there, you can see a line of this part of the negative was inside an envelope. This part of the negative was outside of an envelope. Now, the part that's sticking outside of an envelope was therefore slightly more reactive in getting water coming in and going out of it, which changes it, as well as possibly interacting with a not great acid-containing outer envelope. So the longer we go, the more slight damage like that shows up. And okay. For the first time, we're actually having technical difficulties. It is, okay, there we go. So not quite sure why that happened, but again, you can see this is now the finish line looking right up towards 8th. This is now a new, the newish development, which used to be a vacuum repair and the Dutch store, amongst others. It's just interesting how some views like this, the photo they're taking is of the car race, but everything we're looking at and really interested in is everything else that they're showing, which definitely starts showing up in the other type of photos we get, documenting car crashes. And this one would have confounded me of not knowing where it is unless they had actually recorded it on the outside of the envelope. So the clues are obviously that, well, we've got the leaving the royal city, so it must be the city border somewhere, but which one? And then you have to realize, well, it's no longer a city border because this is obviously, when you realize it's 20th, and everything to the left of the photo is DL 172, which would now be the Connaught area, which did not used to be part of the city. It wasn't until the 1960s that the city bought it as generally provincial property, somewhat served in portions by Burnaby, somewhat served by New Westminster. And this is now a very different intersection of Stewartson Way and 20th and 6th than would have been, I suppose, 20th and Marine Drive. And other interesting photos from crashes. Here is the Bluebird Dairy. So this is 5th Avenue and 8th Street. It's currently a this house got moved over here, other houses got moved in, and there's that nice, nice in that it's colorful mid-rise building. This was the convenience store that was right out in front for a very long time, and was very popular with a lot of the local citizens. They considered the Bluebird to be one of the, well, it was a hot spot for a number of people. In this era, it's a full coffee shop as well as a dairy, which more or less means they sold milk products and maybe didn't have to observe the Sunday trading block. So they could be open pretty much 7 days a week. Now, further documentation of Uptown New Westminster. So we're at 6th and 6th, and the Rexall Tobin Pharmacy. I'm not sure if it was this pharmacy or another couple pharmacies, but if you're an old-time New Westminster resident, you might have wondered why you could pay your utilities and property tax at a drugstore, but not, say, at Royal Bank, which was a surprise to us when we moved to the city in 1988. And my parents, of course, paid their property tax through Royal Bank. And it turns out Royal Bank was not able to receive City of New Westminster property tax because then a long ago mayor didn't own the Royal Bank. He owned a couple pharmacies. So you could pay for city services at a pharmacy. So this would now be Blends. And you can see it's not changed very much. I do think I like the awnings they have out there. Maybe we should look into that. And here we are looking the other direction. So it's 6th and 6th looking west. Before the 6th and 6th building, which is the CIBC building, was built. But you can still see some buildings that have survived down the block. And since 6th and 6th to most people means Woodwards, here's Woodwards decorated up for Christmas. We do have individual photos of pretty much all the display windows. I won't subject you to all of those. I would like to thank Lindsay, one of our old volunteers who set up a number of our Christmas decorations, would have worked on them. What he did later in life, or later, probably a bit too early for him though. But it was quite the impressive store. I even liked it when we moved in here into the 80s. And a bit of a, so on the left, we have some, the result of some bad eggs. So we've got the Lester Pearson grad of 63 deciding it's a good time to spray paint on the Woodwards clock tower. On the right, we have a CKW photo. Croton Studios was the photographer for CKW. If you have a family member that won a prize from CKW, we probably have a photo of them. You'll have to go through many thousands to find them, but they're there. And this is the CKW top dog, along with they did a very big fiesta prize. It was the bane of my existence. I scanned the photos for many months. But this is the food floor entrance to the Woodwards food floor. So this is about 7th, and more or less from the parking lot back is below 7th, which is where used to be mostly parking lot, which is where the first stage of the then Royal City Woodward Place Mall was rebuilt. Here we have a different CKW party. This is an Uptown Merchants Association. It's a 6th Street Merchants Street Party. I'm not exactly sure where we are uptown. It's changed quite a bit. This might have been where Westminster Mall was built, so higher, closer to 6th. But we have the CKW, I believe they called it their Crystal Palace recording studio. We have many pictures of it. It was one, I believe they were one of the first radio stations to do remote broadcasting. And boy, did they do a lot of it. It was much to the delight of several of their disc jockeys. They did not like being in a fishbowl in the cold at gas stations, for example. We have two pictures of, well, on the left, some greaser youths, and Bob Hutton, who was, I believe, brought in a little later on as their morning show host. And then just some girls over here, lost in dance, which is, there are two pictures that I liked so much, slightly cropped down. They're taped to the wall in front of me there, so I don't have to look at a blank wall while I'm scanning all these photos. And again, you'll notice we're 1320, not 980, like most of us know CKW today. An earlier picture, which just looking at this, I have to apologize. We've got so many angles running at different directions. I really need to rotate it 5 degrees and then crop it, so at least something is flat. But here we are at the Odeon Theatre, which is currently, I believe, Korean Seventh-day Adventist Church. And we are at 4th and 6th Street. So you might notice the former Ministry of Highways, I believe, building, currently Nort Homes Development, as well as a Fraser Health office. And across the street would be 7-Eleven. But you can tell from looking at it today that it obviously was a theater, but here it is as a theater with a free film for the Canadian Cancer Society. We'll go to another old building shot. Here we are, the track block. So downtown Westminster, right by Begbie. It is the Marshall Wells department store at this point. So it will, I believe this is after Trapp Hardware moves out, but before it becomes better known and, well, kind of not nicely modified into the First Army and Navy. And since I like showing out artifacts we have in our collection, one of those blocks, probably from somewhere way up there, is actually an artifact in our collection. It was slightly too damaged to be replaced, so it got put on a pallet and given to us. Now, just up the street from here in the Anvil Center, we have what was the Russell Hotel. Currently, it's social housing and some service groups are in the Russell Hotel. This is one we scanned for our drinking exhibit several years ago. Again, documenting accidents, but I'm more interested in the sign. We've got the really nice Russell and hotel lobby, as well as not New Westminster's only ladies and escorts sign, which was a throwback to when Prohibition was removed. You, of course, needed to protect women by keeping them away from the general drinking public. We have, more pictures of the Russell. So this is Begbie Street here, and over on this photo, that's Alexander Street. We're also going from the 50s to the 60s. But if you were having a fancy banquet in New Westminster and any of the city banquets, you would have been in the Russell Hotel. It was the fancy hotel location up until the Royal Towers is built. And these are some pictures of, I would assume, the second major renovation of it, of the, on the left, the dining room, and the right, the bar. This looks a little more late 50s, early 60s. And it's a building I really wished I could have gone in. By the time I was around in the city, I was too young to get into it, as it was the major strip joint of New Westminster. So we'll jump to Uptown, not Uptown, to Sapperton. We're not sure who is going Edmonton or bust on a unicycle, but there she is. And of course, some of the CAPS bikes behind. They were well known for going in every parade available. And we've still got the sign behind them and some more buildings you'll still recognize in Sapperton. We also have a lot of photos of Woolstonecroft agencies who were, I guess, in this stage, they're acting as property developers. So their flagship store was in New Westminster. They're very proud of this, their Ocean Estates building. So this remains on Columbia Street today. If you were able to watch any of the live streams of Pier Park on Fire, the company that was streaming it is based from upstairs, up where the old boardroom was, kind of looking out over on the river on the back where the executive offices were. But a very pretty building and a very nice photo taken of it. This is another building that I love today. I walk past it every time I'm down to Anvil Center, walking into work. It's the Pacific Motors building on Agnes and 8th Street. It was more recently a Subway. It's a sandwich joint, I think, as well as ramen and sushi off on the side. But you can see it was originally a car dealership. You can see they're selling Studebakers and Austin. So they're kind of selling a mishmash of other cars. So they probably were selling, I'm not sure if they were a Nash as well, but one of the rare things is we have internal pictures of them. So this is off to the left, the service counter, where the it's a ramen and sushi restaurant is today. And here's the service bay, which is off to the side, and below, which is, I believe, Zumba. So if you happen to take, or it's upstairs behind the showroom, not 100% sure, but always interesting when you get interior photos. Quite often we don't. Here is a view that most people won't have seen driving in New Westminster. You might not know that the Ancestral Bridge was built by the city of New Westminster. It was later bought out by the province, which removed our toll. So since the city paid to build the bridge to replace the low-level multi-use train, pedestrian, and traffic bridge, which is pretty much the train bridge today, they went ahead and built their own bridge and decided to put tolls on it. We have now so the bridge I think was 1958, so we're probably late 50s, very early 60s. We have some a nice eyebrow containing car. And it does make me wonder, was it manned or staffed 24 hours a day? I suppose it had to be. One of those things I don't think of. And the view that anyone today would love, a wide open and empty bridge, usually so horrendously clogged with traffic. So skipping over to another bridge, and something that was mentioned in my previous talk about the good ship photos. So this is the original New Westminster end of the Patello Bridge. And you can imagine there would have been a number of accidents probably. That's the one I want, because that's your decision process. Again, another beautiful welcome to New Westminster, the Royal City neon sign. You've got your directions of New Westminster, Vancouver, Vancouver Island, as well as Harrison Hot Springs, Mission, and Coquitlam off to the right. But right behind there is the New Westminster War Memorial, which is why this is a photo that was taken for the Canadian Legion. because this will now date this to being no earlier than 1952 when it is moved to in front of Westminster City Hall as it is today. But here it is in its old original form. It's almost surprises me it didn't get destroyed by a car. And I always heard it was Volkswagens that are the car that floated. Well, this is a car that's an NSU Prinz Coupe being pushed into the Fraser River from a beach slightly upriver of New Westminster by McKay Motors. Prinz was a West German car manufacturer, oddly enough bought up by Volkswagen and rolled into Auto Union, which means it's now one of the rings represented by the Audi logo. It does slightly concern me that if you look at the detail in there, it looks like they've just put that on with tape. I really hope they didn't sell this car to someone. There was a number of photos taken in this series. Won't subject you to all of them. In this photo to the left, you can see the Westminster Bridge, often called the train bridge, the Patella Bridge, as well as the boat behind, which is the Canadian CN ferry SS Kenora. So I believe that's a train ferry that is taking cars from Port Mann to Victoria, which is something I hadn't realized that existed. And then we have just another shot of them a bit further down New Westminster. I really hope no one had to buy that car. So we're back to Auckland and 12th. I showed you some pictures last time of the Digni Speedway, which is around Rumble in Burnaby, near McPherson, where the Terry Fox Theatre is. So this is a Digni Speed Racer car, obviously sponsored by Butler Tire of New Westminster. And the reason why this time I'm showing you some race cars is because of another former racetrack that used to exist, Westwood. So this was unfortunately destroyed by the Westwood Plateau development. Some might argue that having a massive home development was much more important than auto racing, but I did get to enjoy at least a couple races there. And if you live in the Westwood Plateau area, that's why you might find some interesting names like surviving in street names such as Deer's Leap or Carousel or Hairpin, all of which were features of the racetrack that was roughly carved out of the Westwood Plateau. So this is a series taken for Players Tobacco, Imperial Tobacco. They had always seemed to have sponsored auto racing. They were still doing it in the late 80s by the time I got up there. And we have a bit more mixed cars there and there. So we do have some interesting series of photos, including crashes, as well as some cars that were made in New Westminster to race there, I believe by Arlie Pilkey. If you ever wonder, I think there's a Carousel Street. This is kind of what the Carousel is named after. It was the one big sweeping corner at the end of the straightaway, which we just saw. And as we have photos of CKNW, we will of course have a small collection of photos of Elvis. Because of the immigration status of his manager, who was not American, I believe Vancouver was only one of 2 concerts that Elvis ever did outside of the United States, the other one being in Germany while he was doing his national service. So here we have the good promotion shot. So I'm sure management loved that. I don't remember the name of our announcers, Luckily, that part of my brain has gone back to important things. But since I was scanning so many photos, I had every single announcer known. And then we have, again, a bit of a shell-shocked looking woman meeting Elvis. So I'm including these photos because I'm planning on, for our winter, which will be December, I guess January, February, March, I'll be doing a talk showing the photos of CKW, since boy, do we have enough. The other talk will be about industry in New Westminster. And initially I'd thought, oh, well, they sure took a lot of photos of Alaska pine, which we would later know as Doman, well, the Doman mill site. But I'm going to you'll thank me later. It will be broadened greatly to include just industrial photos of New Westminster. And it was interesting when I looked at the information of this photo. So it is a very long amount of timber. You have a seaboard sticker on the end of it. You'll notice it's being carried by a forklift as well as a high loader. These are spars that were being sent to England for a rebuild of the Mayflower to help foster post-war glad feelings between the United Kingdom, I believe it was a UK merchant that was building the replica to reenact the full voyage to the United States. So here are two massive timbers that were built into what's now known as the Mayflower II, which was being greatly refit for, I believe this is the 400th, 2020 was the 400th anniversary of the sailing. So it was refit extensively for this year to make another reenactment voyage. I'm assuming that was called off. But if you see the Mayflower in the news, realize that those are probably the central timber. The main one we're seeing is probably the keel timber, and the little one down the side would probably be one of the big bow timbers. Those are usually the two big massive ones, and maybe a little bit of the stern. Not quite sure how the Mayflower would have been built, but a little bit of New Westminster got built into the replica. And that's about where our talk ends. I'll leave, since we have Thanksgiving coming up, I'll leave you here with the 1954 Grand Champion turkey. Don't really know why the photo was taken. I think it's for Woodwards, but here he is. So thank you very much for attending. Today's Croton Studio talk showed you just 60 images of the 12,000 scanned so far. That's slightly under 0.5%. So massive, and that's still only 2/3 of the collection. So we have 1/3, which is 6 banker's boxes of negatives that need to be processed. As I said, please look forward to future talks. One will be on industrial New Westminster, and another the photos of CKW. So have a happy and safe Thanksgiving. Thank you very much for attending. My name's Allan Blair. Thank you very much. So, well,